Wanted to welcome everyone to the Loudoun County Public Library One Book, One Community Author Program, celebrating this year's selection, Refugee, with author Alan Gratz. My name is Christina Olarunda, and I am the chair of the Library Board of Trustees. As it is each year, the 2021 One Book, One Community program is sponsored by the Irwin Uran Gift Fund. The fund was established in 1999 through a $1 million gift from Irwin Uran to support programs that create better understanding among all people. Irwin Uran died in 2007, leaving a legacy of humanitarian contributions that has affected the lives of thousands of people. And now I would like to introduce our author, Alan Gratz. He is the best-selling author of 17 novels for young readers, including Refugee, which spent more than 2 years on the New York Times bestseller list and is the winner of 14 state awards. Its other accolades include the Sidney Taylor Book Award, the National Jewish Book Award, the Sybil's Middle Grade Fiction Award, and many others. Refugee was also a Global Read Aloud book for 2018 and was selected for many nominations by a select panel of library employees for this year's Loudoun County Public Library One Book, One Community program. Alan was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee, attended the University of Tennessee, where he earned a college scholars degree with a specialization in creative writing and later a master's degree in English education. He lives with his family in Asheville, North Carolina. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Christina. I'm really stoked to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, we're excited to have you here. And so before we sort of get into the questions, we have a lot of questions from the community, and we'll have the chat open as we're speaking. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to share with us sort of your inspiration and the background about writing your book, Refugee.
Great. Yeah, I would love to do that. I'm going to share my screen here so that you guys can see some pictures that I have to show. It won't be long, and then we'll get to your questions. This may answer some of them, but I know you will have lots more. So let me share my screen here with you guys. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right. So, hey guys, I'm Alan Gratz, the author of all the books that you see here on the screen. I'm going to talk about one of those specifically, Refugee. But first, a little bit more about me. As Christina said, I was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. I went to the University of Tennessee, to study creative writing because I knew from when I was the age of a lot of my readers that I wanted to grow up and be a writer. So I graduated. I did a lot of other jobs that had to do with writing and had to do with books while I worked on my own stories. And then in 2006, I got my very first book published, Samurai Short Stuff, that book up there in the corner. And I've been really lucky to have about a book a year published ever since then. Now, I don't live in Knoxville anymore. As Christina said, I live in Asheville in Western North Carolina, and this is my full-time job. I get to wake up in the mornings, I get to walk down the hall to my office, which is where I'm sitting right now, and I get to work on writing books all day long. And I think it's pretty much the greatest job in the world. So let me tell you a little bit more about this book specifically, Refugee, how I got the idea for it, and some of the things I learned along the way, and then we'll get into your questions. So be thinking, if some of you guys have already sent in questions, that's awesome. Be thinking of other questions you'd like to ask. So the story of Refugee began for me with this ship, this real ship, the MS St. Louis. That's a picture of it there at the top. That's not the Titanic. It looks a lot like it, but that's actually the MS St. Louis. It was a real ship, and it left Nazi Germany in 1939, bound for Cuba with more than 900 Jewish refugees on board, many of whom had already been in concentration camps. But this was right before World War II, and the Nazis, they had more prisoners than they had prison camps. So they would throw you in there, they would beat you, torture you, starve you, and then if you survived, they would kick you back out again to make room for new prisoners. And they would tell you, you have 2 weeks to get out of our country or we'll do it again. So people would buy the first ticket out of Germany they could, and for many of them, it was this ship, the St. Louis. The St. Louis sails across the Atlantic Ocean and pulls into Havana Harbor, and all the refugees, they have their suitcases in hand, and they're ready to go and live in Cuba, and the Cuban government said, we changed our mind, you can't come in. And the Jewish refugees were like, but we filled out all our paperwork. We paid all of our fees. We sailed across the ocean to get here. If we go back to Germany, they're going to kill us. But the Cuban government said, not our problem, and didn't let them in. So the ship sails north up the east coast of the United States, and they beg the United States, please, will you let us in so we don't have to go back to Germany where they're going to kill us? And the United States said, no. So they sailed north to Canada, and they were like, please, will you let us in so we don't have to go back to Germany where they're going to kill us? And Canada said, no. Now they have nowhere to go. They're running out of food and water and fuel for their ship. So they turn around and they go back to Europe. They don't have to go back to Germany, thankfully. They find 4 countries who agree to take them in, but 3 of those countries were right next door to Germany. And when World War II broke out just a month and a half later, most of those refugees were right in the way of Hitler and his armies, and they were captured and sent back to concentration camps where many of them died. And none of them had to die if somebody somewhere said, we got this, we'll take you in, we'll give you refuge. I was trying to figure out exactly how I was going to write a book about this, about the MS St. Louis, who my characters were going to be, and what the story on board was going to be like when my family and I went on vacation down to Florida. So one morning we got up and we said, hey, let's go for a walk on the beach, which is where we found this. It was a raft that someone had used to come to the United States. You can see in the pictures, it was homemade. It was built out of plywood and 2x6s. The outside of the raft, that blue stuff, is metal from a shed roof. The yellow stuff in the bottom left picture, that's the stuff that we buy at hardware stores and use as insulation around windows and doors. They had used it to spray the whole bottom of their raft and all the way up and down in the cracks to keep the water out, which I thought was really clever. On the outside of the raft, you guys can see those empty gas cans in the top picture because there was an engine mounted in the back that ran a propeller that's buried down there in the sand. And inside we found wet clothes and empty bottles of water, half-eaten bags of food, anything these people could take with them to help them survive. No one was on board this raft when we found it. It was already abandoned. To this day, I don't know what happened to the people who were on it. I hope they made it here safely. I've never known. I also don't know where they came from. My best guess has always been that they came from Cuba because that's the closest of the Caribbean countries to southern Florida. But that's still 90 miles away, right? 90 miles across open sea. I wouldn't want to go fishing in that thing, let alone take it that far. But that's exactly what somebody did to come here and have what we have. My family and I, we were stunned by this. We walked around it. We talked about it. It made us think about all the things that we take for granted. The roof over our heads, the food on our plates, the freedom and safety that we enjoy as American citizens. And me personally, I was like, what am I doing? Why am I writing about refugees 75 years ago when we have refugees right here, right now, 100 yards away from where I was sleeping last night? Why am I not telling that story? So, of course, the whole time I was thinking about all these other things, about the MS St. Louis and the raft that I'd found on the beach, the news was filled with images of the Syrian civil war and the Syrian refugee crisis. The Syrian civil war started in 2011, and it is still going on. The Syrian government is fighting with Syrian rebels. Kurdish rebels have tried to take over parts of the country. ISIS, a terrorist group, has taken over parts of the country. Iran has joined the fight in support of the government. Russian fighters have dropped bombs on Syria. American battleships have fired missiles into Syria. And the people who are caught in the middle are the Syrian people. Since the beginning of this war, close to 12 million Syrians have lost their homes. 12 million, that's a huge number, and it's kind of hard to get your head around. So 12 million is more people than live in the entire city of New York. That's about 8.5 million. It's also, coincidentally, more, that 8.5 million, that's about the population of your state, of the state of Virginia, right? That's more people than live in the entire state of Virginia. It's more people than live in all but 6 U.S. states. Only California, Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, and Pennsylvania have more people in them than that number of people who've lost their homes. So imagine taking everybody that lived in New York City or everybody that lives in the entire state of Virginia and saying that over the last 10 years, every single one of them became homeless. Think about the refugee crisis we'd be dealing with here in the United States. That's what they are dealing with over in the Middle East. Roughly half of those people, about 6 million people, have left their country looking for some other place to live. Many of them end up in refugee camps in countries next door, like Jordan or Turkey, like in that bottom left picture, but many more are pushing on to the European Union for safety and refuge. And maybe you've seen pictures like the one at the bottom right, with refugees in orange life vests crammed into black rubber rafts, trying to get across the Mediterranean Sea to places like Greece or Italy. But that's a really dangerous water crossing too. In 2016, at the height of the crisis, an estimated 5,000 people died trying to make that water crossing. And more are dying every year. And none of them had to die if somebody somewhere said, "We got this. We'll take you in. We'll give you refuge." Okay, so you can imagine what I'm thinking now. First, I wanted to write a book about Jewish refugees. Then I wanted to write a book about Cuban refugees. Now I wanted to write a book about Syrian refugees. And I was like, which of these books do I write first? They're all really important stories. And then I was like, wait, why do I have to write 3 different books? What if I wrote one book and I put all 3 stories in it? And that's how Refugee, the book, was born. Refugee then is the story of 3 different kids, as many of you guys know, because I know a lot of you guys have already read this book. But all 3 characters are fictional. I made them up. But every single thing that happens to them really happened to someone on one of those journeys in one of those time periods. These are just pictures I pulled offline to kind of give me a visual of these characters, but they're fictional. But everything that happens to them happened to a real person. It's the story of Joseph, who leaves Nazi Germany with his family and more than 900 other Jewish refugees on board the MS St. Louis, bound for freedom and safety in Cuba in the 1930s. It's the story of Isabel, who escapes Cuba in the 1990s with her family and her next door neighbor's family on board a raft very much like that one I found on the beach, bound for freedom and safety in Florida. And it's the story of Mahmoud, who leaves Syria on foot with his family to try and get to Germany for freedom and safety in the present day. And I weave all 3 of these stories together, so you get a chapter from Joseph, then a chapter from Isabel, then a chapter from Mahmoud, all the way out so you can see the parallels in their lives. And in the end, so you can see how each of these 3 characters and their families are actually connected across the thousands of miles and the decades that separate them. And that, of course, is a big spoiler. And so if you're still reading the book and you haven't gotten to the end, I don't want to ruin that here in case you haven't read the book. Who knows, it's probably going to come up in all of our questions, but I won't spoil it yet. So I hope you will read Refugee if you haven't already. And if you did, and when you do, if you did, I hope that it does for you what finding that raft on the beach did for me all those years ago. I hope that it takes something invisible to you, the refugee crisis in the world, and makes it visible either again or maybe for the very first time. So that is just briefly a little bit about me and my inspiration behind the book, why I chose those 3 groups, because those were the ones that spoke to me in the moment. But there's more to tell about that, obviously, and I've got lots more to say about the book, and I know you guys have lots more questions about the book. So, Christina, if you're game, I'm game to get into it and to see what questions we've got.
Well, Alan, I first of all want to say, really on behalf of our community, thank you so much for writing this book. I think it was very powerful, very timely. But I think the amazing thing that I took away, and I'm sure many of the readers did as well, is that the actions or inactions of characters in this book had a huge impact on how someone else lived. And it really brought to life the fact that what we do and how we live doesn't just impact us, but it impacts others as well. And so I'm not going to spoil the end, but at the end, I thought it was just so amazing of what you wrote and how you captured together. And we might come across some of the questions.
Right.
But
it may come up. Yeah.
you.
But
Thank you for writing this book.
That's a big thing for me in this book and in a lot of the books that I write. I really believe that we are stronger when we work together. And we've seen a lot of isolationism in our country and in the world. at large just recently. We've seen it throughout the history of humanity, but it's come back again. And
Right.
and I think we have to think of each other as human beings first, and think, if what if that was us, right? What if you were one of these refugees on one of these journeys? Wouldn't you want somebody to take you in? Wouldn't you be looking for help? And think about that. I hope that everybody will empathize with these characters, and that it will open your hearts and minds to the plight of refugees past and present.
Yes, yes. So thank you again, Alan. So without further ado, we're going to get to the questions.
Yeah.
So for all of the audience members, if you have questions, feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll periodically look at the chat and answer questions there. So the first one we have is Sue from Centerville. She has led an ESL book club for 13 years. And last year they read Refugee together. So her question is, what can Americans learn from refugees?
Well, I think we have a lot to learn from refugees. First of all, we have to remember that a lot of our nation is founded on refugees. If you think all the way back to the Pilgrims, they were religious refugees. We don't often think about, we think of refugees now as people who are fleeing war, and that is one of the classifications for refugees. But refugees are also people who are fleeing natural disasters. They're people who are fleeing religious persecution. They're fleeing racial persecution. There are multiple reasons that somebody might be classified as a refugee. And so what can we learn from refugees? There's always new things to learn from other cultures and other ways of life. And so I think the great thing that makes America America is that we're this fantastic melting pot of so many. It's one of the things that we're struggling with, because we have so many conflicting ideas and so many conflicting points of view, but we've always managed to find a way to make those work together. And I think the more perspectives we get, the better we are. That way we see the world in all kinds of new and exciting ways. So, and there have been plenty of refugees who've gone on to have a tremendous impact on American society. But even if they don't go on to be like, oh, I don't know, like the founder of Apple Computers or something, then they still are part of the fabric of the United States, and the fabric of our lives. And I know that my life is richer for all the different people that I know, from whether they were born here in the United States or whether they came here during their own lifetime. I'm richer for knowing those people. So what can we learn? We can learn how, I mean, to be better people. We can learn more about the world and doing exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So our next set of questions are going to be from individuals who want know a little bit more about you. So Helen asked, did you think you were going to be an author when you were a kid?
Huh. So yeah, I've really wanted to be an author since I was very little. So I wasn't sure how it would happen. So let me back up. But people often ask me, like, did I have a teacher who was very inspirational? I had a bunch of great teachers who encouraged me in my writing, but I kind of came in saying, like, I want to be a writer. And I've looked back at what the inspiration for that was, and I really kind of have to point to a movie. There was a movie that came out when I was 5 years old. A lot of the younger viewers will probably have never heard of it because it came out in 1977. It was very old. It was called Star Wars. Have you heard of this, Christina? Maybe you've heard of this movie.
Yes, I think maybe.
Maybe a little bit. And I'm kidding. Most people, of course, have heard of Star Wars and all the 10 movies and TV shows and everything that's been made after that. But I'm not kidding about the huge impact it had on me. I was 5 years old when the very first Star Wars movie came out. What we call now A New Hope. It was just called Star Wars then. And I saw it in the movie theater over and over and over again. And I would go home and I would go out in the backyard and I would pretend to be Han Solo or Luke Skywalker and have adventures. But I wasn't reliving the movies. I was making up my own stories about those characters. So what I was really doing was I was creating fan fiction. There wasn't a word for it back then, or if there was, I didn't know it. I was just taking my favorite story, my favorite world, and telling my own stories within that world. And that led me to, I had all the action figures and I made up stories for that. And I made up little movies and filmed those with my parents' old, like 8mm camera or whatever it was. And probably 16mm. But I was really into creating these stories, and that was my first taste of storytelling. And I eventually started to create my own worlds and my own characters and tell my own stories about those. I didn't know if I was going to grow up and write movies or plays or comic books or radio plays. I just knew I wanted to tell stories. And as I got older, I refined that and figured out where I wanted to be within that. But yeah, from a very young age, I wanted to be a writer, and I worked on it all through grade school. I worked on it all through middle school. I worked on it when I was in high school. I thought for a little while I might be a journalist because I grew up in Knoxville and I didn't know anybody who wrote stories for a living, right? I saw people's names in the movie theater and I saw people's names on books. I knew that was a job you could have, but I didn't know anybody who did those jobs. So I thought, well, I know people who work at the newspaper. I could just work at the newspaper. But my heart was in stories, was in fiction, make believe, and they really don't like it if you make stuff up in the newspaper. So I decided I would go for it. I didn't know how you made any money at it. I didn't know how you made a living at it, but I went for it. And it still took me about 10 years after I graduated to sell my first book. But it took me that long, like 30 years of dreaming and hoping and working for it to get there.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So, Caitlin and Miriam in fifth grade, as well as Abigail and Celine from Smarts Mill Middle School, they ask, when and why did you start writing books, and how old were you when you wrote Refugee?
Oh, okay. Well, gosh, that they're gonna make me do some math there. So I started writing books, period, in the fifth grade. My very
That's
first
awesome.
book that I wrote was called "Real Kids Don't Eat Spinach," and
I love it.
it never got we never sent it out. It never got published. You can't buy it anywhere. I still have it on a clipboard somewhere in a box in my office. And I worked on it all through fifth grade. I took it around from class to class, adding notebook pages to that clipboard as I added chapters to it. And like I said, it never got published anywhere. I drew all the pictures and I did all the writing, but it was my first taste of writing a longer project, right? Like before that, I'd written short stories and or I'd written little short scripts and things like that. But this was my first time writing a book, and I got I got the itch. Like that hooked me, and I knew from that point on that books were going to be something I was really interested in writing. I wrote my first full length like 300-page book when I was in college. It's terrible. I won't tell you what it's about because no one's allowed to read it. It's my bad college novel. But it taught me how to finish a big longer project. Then when I graduated, I started working on more books. I actually wrote two whole books, and sent them out and tried to get them published that never got published before I wrote Samurai Shortstop. And so I would write one, edit it, send it out, get rejection letters. Start writing the next one, edit it, send it out, get more rejection letters. And it was that third book that I finally got published. So Refugee came out in 2018. I was born in 1972. Gosh, I don't have my calculator handy for how old I was. Uh, uh, I don't know. I'm bad at math. Somebody out there has probably already done the math. I'm going to pull out my phone and figure it out just to answer your question. So 2018 minus 1972, 46 years old. I was 46 years old when I wrote, or 45 or 40, probably 45 when I wrote it, 46 when it came out. And here's the thing, Refugee is maybe the best book I've ever written. I have favorite books. We probably have a question about that. And I have other books that I love all my books, but Refugee has definitely been my biggest book, the one that most people have read all around the world. And I could not have written it when I was 18. I couldn't have written it when I was 26. I couldn't have written it when I was 36. I needed to be that old. It was my 13th book. I can tell you that. And I needed to have written all the other 12 books before it to get good enough to be able to tackle this story. When I came up with the idea for it, like I told you guys at the outset, I really started with the idea of the MS St. Louis. And I thought my book was only going to be about the MS St. Louis. And then all those other things happened. And I started thinking about maybe making the story broader, that it might have all these connections. And I called up my editor, and she was just expecting me to write a book about the MS St. Louis. And I called up my editor and I said, I think I want to do more. I think I want to do like 3 stories and find ways to link them. And she was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like an incredible idea, but can you do it? I'm like, sure. Of course, it was the hardest book I've ever written, right? I mean, like it was this huge project, and getting it all to fit and to weave together was like the most complicated thing I'd ever done. And there's no way I could have done it as book number 12 or 11 or 10 or 9 or 8. Like it took me all those other books to get good enough to really be able to pull this off.
Right. I think that's pretty awesome. And I just want to interject and let all of the audience, especially the young people, you heard Alan just say that he was in the 5th grade when he wrote his first book. So, guys, be encouraged. If you're in the 5th grade or even higher than the 5th grade, you can do this. And Alan is what did it say? You're a 17-time, New York Times bestseller. So it is 100% possible. And so just wanted to let you guys be reminded that there's always a beginning to everything. So we're going to go to the chat. I have a question here. It says, given the political climate around immigration today, have you gotten any pushback against your book from people? And if so, how have you responded?
Sure, the word refugee has become a real hot button word itself, and which is really sad to me, because a refugee is really just by definition a person who's been driven from their home by violence or natural disaster or persecution, and they need help, right? This is not a person who chose to leave their house. It's not a person who is coming to our country to steal our jobs. It's not a person. Most of these refugees hope to only live wherever they're settled temporarily. They all want to go home. Most of them didn't. They don't want to leave in the first place, and they only leave when it gets so desperate that the only other, if they stay, they will die. Their families will die, and so they leave. And so, but refugees have become a real, like the whole word, like I said, has become very much politically charged. And so my wife doesn't write books or anything like that, but she runs her own business where she sells like quilt patterns, and she went on Facebook or wherever, I think it's Facebook that back then, and the day it came out and said, here's my husband's new book, right? She just showed the cover and she said, my husband has a new book today, go check it out if you're interested. And the first comment was like this political screed against refugees, because somebody just saw the name. They didn't even read the book. They just saw the name on the title on the book and went crazy about it. And unfortunately, I think that's the attitude that a lot of people have. I hope that people will give the book a chance and read it. I tried to stay apolitical in the story and instead just show you what happened in each of these times to each of these groups of people, right? And I guess you could finish the book and say, good, I'm glad some of these people didn't make it where they were going. That's obviously not what I hope you feel the opposite. I hope that you empathize with them and you want to reach out and help anybody who needs help like that now. But I don't tell you what to do. I just tell you what's going on in the world. And then I leave it up to you to make the decision about how you want to react to that. So for the most part, when people come at it, I just let them have their say. I mean, I think the book speaks for itself. I try not to amplify their voices or get into arguments with them, because I think that just gives them more attention. And so for the most part, I hope that the book does a lot of the speaking for me. I mean, obviously I do events like this and I will tell people how I feel. I think we should be letting in a whole lot more refugees. And I'm glad that the Biden administration has just said that we're especially allowing more Afghan refugees in. Oh my gosh, we're a big part of the reason that there are a lot of Afghan refugees. So the least we can do is welcome those folks into our country. So I'm happy to tell people in person, but for the most part, I let the book speak for itself.
Perfect. Moving on to another question. It's Yeats in 5th grade at Mill Run. He says, I want to be a writer when I grow up. Writers make people feel. They are marvelous. I was wondering, what does it take to be a good writer, to make people feel? Where do you get ideas? And is it hard being a writer? I want to make a book for the school library. I want people to see my book and read it, but I need help. How do you make a book that will make people feel?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh. And I love that they already see that that's what books really great books can do. Like, I think that reading builds empathy. Empathy is when you understand what it's like to be another person, right? And when you sympathize, it's kind of like a similar word, empathy and sympathy. When you sympathize with them, you feel bad for them, or you feel emotions for them. But when you empathize, you imagine yourself as those people. And that's what I try to do, is write about characters who are real. Like with Refugee, like Mahmoud feels invisible to start the book, right? And it's partially because of the war, but it started even before that. Mahmoud if he wants to be invisible because he gets picked on at school by bullies. And I was picked on by bullies when I was a kid. I was the smallest kid in my class for a lot of grade school. Now I'm 6'2", so just like you can grow up and be a writer, you can also grow up and be tall and intimidate people. So, but I was the shortest kid for a long, long time. And I remember what it felt like. I remember wanting to disappear and just fade into the wall and like curl up into a ball and let nobody see me. And I tried to put that into Mahmoud. When I was a kid, my parents argued a lot, and I worried that they were going to get divorced. I had friends whose parents had gotten divorced, and I was frightened that that would happen to my family. And I put those fears into Isabel, right? I have her struggling to keep her family together. And when I was a kid, I also wanted to grow up really fast. I did not want to be a kid. I wanted to be an adult. I would wear like a tie to school, and I carried my books in a briefcase. I was a real geek. And but I wanted to grow. I wanted people to take me seriously. I wrote to the president and said we need a National Kids Day because they're not taking us seriously enough, right? I was very earnest as a kid, and I put those feelings into Joseph, who wants to grow up and be a man earlier than he is. And of course, now that I'm an adult, all I want to be is a kid again, as you can see by all the toys that I have behind me. And so there's a little bit of me in each of those three main characters. None of them are me, right? But there's a little bit of me in each of those characters. And so my advice to the young writer is, if you want to create characters that people care about and root for and empathize with, give them more than just the story they're in. Make them human beings. Give them the same kind of troubles and problems that people have no matter where they live. Like, you can feel like you're like you want to hide from bullies and also be in a country that is going through a civil war, right? You can wish that you were growing up faster and be a man in a country that's being taken over by fascists in Nazi Germany, right? You can be worried about your family splitting up even if you live in communist Cuba and you're starving, right? These are basic human things. They're basic relationship things. So my advice is, think about what kind of adventure you're going to put your character in, what kind of life or death or high stakes thing that you want to put them in externally that's going on, trying to escape Cuba, trying to escape Nazi Germany, trying to escape the Syrian civil war. But then think about who they are as human beings. Think about who they are as people and how they relate to the other people in their lives. And that's one of the things I try to do to make people feel for my characters. I think it's a great question, and it's one of the hardest things about writing. It's super easy to just create, like, just give a character a name and have them run around and have adventures. But to make them feel human, to make them feel like they have a life off the page, I think it's all about making sure that their lives are really complex and that there's more going on than just the one thing that the story is about.
Right. Well, we're going to go to the chat and look at some questions there. We actually have a lot of questions coming in about Hana.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So now we're getting into spoilery territory. Is it okay if we do that?
Yeah, I think it's okay because the questions are here, so we
okay.
can go
So
ahead
they're reading the questions even if I'm not answering them. Okay, let's do it. So listen, we're going to get into some spoilery stuff here. If you haven't finished the book, you might want to, take your headphones off, or that was weird because I could hear myself, or plug your ears, or do something for just a minute. I'll go like this when we're done talking about Hana. But if you haven't finished and you don't want the spoilers, this is your official spoiler warning. Okay, Christina, lay it on me.
Okay. So the question says that this was a pivotal moment in the book about Hana. Mm-hmm. So they want to know, was Hana the story of the child that was found on the beach deceased in Greece that was shown in all of the newspapers?
Right. So first, to answer the question like that, no. Hana is a fictional character, and so is not based on any one child. Now, they do, after that journey on the water, after the the raft explodes, and Mahmoud and his family are in the water after Hana is given away, and they're saved by the Coast Guard. They do arrive on the island of Lesbos, and that is where that photograph was taken. That is a place where bodies wash up on the shore. And in the book, they see a body, and Mahmoud's mother worries that that is Hana. She's panicky, and she runs over, and it's not. And Mahmoud feels this immense relief, but also this immense guilt at being relieved at somebody else's death, thinking, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness it's not Hana," but oh my gosh, I'm feeling relief at somebody else's death. Like, that's a horrible thing to feel, but it's very human. It's very natural to feel that way. No, so Hana's story is not that child's story, but I wanted to show something like that for those folks who haven't seen that picture. It's devastating to see that picture, and I wanted to show the horror of this water crossing, the danger of this water crossing, the mortal danger. And so I showed that, but that's not Hana's story. No, she is fictional. So you got more about Hana? I bet we have more about Hana.
Well, they want to know what happened to her.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a spoiler alert, if you're going to write another book, a sequel
Right.
to this one, but people would like to know what happened to her.
Sure. That's the question I get most often about Hana, is what happens to Hana, right? Okay. So Hana is given away. We don't see her again in the book. One of the things that I learned in my research was that refugees in almost every era and in almost every refugee journey, they leave home with more people than arrive at their destination. Somewhere along the way, people are lost. Sometimes they get sick and they can't continue. Sometimes they don't have enough money to pay their way through. Sometimes they don't have the right paperwork. Sometimes the families are separated at the border and they are enter a country separately. And sometimes people die along the way. But every journey that I read about, these three and others that I considered writing about, people lost family members along the way. And the biggest thing about it was they got to their new place of refuge and they had no idea if the person they left behind was alive or dead or sick or well. They had no idea. And they spent much of the rest of their time searching for that person or people, trying to reconnect with them. And I realized that if I was going to be honest about this journey, about all these journeys, that I was going to need to show someone being lost in every story. And someone is lost in every story. Sometimes multiple people are lost in each story, but no family arrives in their destination in this book with everybody that they set out with, right? And that's on purpose. So what happens to Hana? I do not know. And I know that is the worst cheatery answer, and there are people out there screaming and yelling and throwing things at their computers, but I don't know, and I don't want you to know, because I will never, ever write a sequel to Refugee. People beg me for a sequel. Will you show us what happens? Will you show us what happens? No. And the whole reason I won't is the same reason that I don't have Hana returned, or I don't tell you even like what her fate is. We don't know if she's going to be returned or if she's alive or dead. We don't know. And the reason is because so many refugees get to where they're going and have that same question. Now, if you're out there and you're mad and you're frustrated and you're like, but I have to know, I need to know what happens to Hana. Great. I want you to hold on to that feeling, and I want you to remember it. And now I want you to multiply it times 1,000, times 1,000,000. And imagine that it's actually somebody from your family, right? Imagine that it's a little sister or an older sibling, or your mom or your dad or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent. Imagine that you left home with somebody that you love, and you went on a long journey and finally found refuge somewhere. But one of those people had to be left behind, and you have no idea what happened to them. I want you to feel angry. I want you to feel frustrated. I want you to feel sad, because I want you to know what it feels like for those refugee families who arrive at their new homes, their new destinations that they try to make into a home, not knowing what happened to their family members. So my editor, when I wrote that book, the first draft, she came back and she says, "What happens to Hana?" And I said, "I will never tell you." And she said, "But you've got to put it in there Like, nobody will accept this. You're going to have like a happy ending. And I said, no, and here's why. And I told her exactly what I just told you. And she said, okay, I get it. Like, I did it on purpose. I didn't do it to make you, just to make you mad. I didn't do it just to frustrate you. I didn't do it, just to make it, you have something to talk about in your classes with your teacher. I did want to frustrate you and anger you, but for a reason. I didn't want to just do it just to make an interesting story. I did it because I want you to know what it feels like for those refugees. So I'm sorry, not sorry. That's my answer.
But I will add on to that, if at the
Yes.
end of your book, I think there's a certain level of hope, though, of
Yes.
hope of that they will find Hana. So
Yes.
when they're in Germany, and I'll just read a little part of it because
Yeah,
it
go
was
for
really
it.
moving to me. It says, "They died so I could live. Do you understand? They died so all these people could live. All the grandchildren and nieces and nephews they never got to meet. But you'll get to meet them," she told Mahmoud. "You're still alive, and so is your little sister. Somewhere I know it. You saved her, and together we'll find her. Yes, I promise. We'll find her and bring her home." And then a little further down, now it's Mahmoud. He's thinking, and he says, he gazed, lingering on the picture. He was filled with sadness for the boy his age, the boy who had died so Ruthie could live. But Mahmoud was also filled with gratitude. Joseph had died so Ruthie could live, and one day welcome Mahmoud and his family into her house. So I think that even though you don't tell us everything that happened, there's still a sense of hope. And
Yeah.
I would imagine even in real life, there's a sense of hope that maybe we don't know, but there's the possibility that we can find out, and find them or
Yeah.
help in some sort of way.
In my heart, Hana is alive and well and will be reunited with her family. That's the ending I would like to see. But I honestly, like, people say, like, what happens after it? I don't keep planning the book after it happens. It's over for me. Like, the characters, I don't know, their future is unwritten. But I can hope that it's better. And Ruthie hopes that she is alive and says, I will do everything to help you find her. So I hope that she's out there and alive because I am a hopeful person. And I would never write a book that is that has no hope in it, right? There are sad things that happen in this, and there are characters who don't make it to the end, but there is hope in this book. There is hope at the end of it. Not for every character, but for a lot of them. So I would never write a hopeless book. And in my heart, they're going to find her. In reality, it's just unwritten, and that's the point.
Right, right. Well, we have a question here from Fawn from North Star High School, and he asks, "Why did you decide to kill off Ivan, and why with a shark attack? I love your book, by the way. The emotions conveyed in it really moved
That's
me."
awesome. Appreciate the comment. Thank you. And the question. So again, this is an answer that's somewhat like Hana's. When I was doing research into that journey from Cuba to the United States in the 1990s, I came across a really staggering statistic. I read in a book, they estimate, now there's no way to know this for sure because nobody was signing up to leave before they left Cuba. So people were slipping out on rafts in the dead of night. And so we don't know exactly how many people left, but they have estimates. And they believe that 3 out of every 5 people who left Cuba on board a raft in the 90s trying to get to the United States died at sea. 3 out of every 5 people. So let's stop and take a minute and talk about the math, which I'm not good at, which you see why I had to do subtraction on my phone. So, but I can tell you this: 3 out of 5 is more than half, right? So more than half of the people who left Cuba on board a raft died at sea. Now, that does not mean that every time a raft full of 5 people left, 3 of those people were going to die. What it means is that sometimes a whole raft full of people would make it just fine. Sometimes an entire raft would be lost at sea. But if you averaged it out, if you did the math, more people died trying to get to the United States by sea than survived. That is a staggering statistic. If 1,000 people left, then more than 500, like 600 people would have died at sea. Like that's just a wild number to me, and it's devastating. And I realized I was writing a story where everybody made it. Everybody on my raft survived all the way and made it. Now, Leto, he jumps off to help save his family, and so he doesn't arrive with them. He doesn't die, but he doesn't arrive with them. But I still thought, if 3 out of every 5 people died at sea, am I being honest to the struggle of those Cubans who left Cuba to get to the United States? If I make it look like you put a whole bunch of people in a raft and set off and you're going to make it to the United States, right? They go through all kinds of challenges, but they all survive. And I thought, no, I think I need to show somebody on this raft dying on the journey. And I went back and forth about what character to do and how to do it. But one of the things that I watched a lot of documentaries that were interviews with people who had been boteros, the people who had left on rafts from Cuba to come to the United States. And many, like every documentary I watched was like, the sharks, the sharks, the sharks. The sharks were ever present. The sharks were circling their rafts, waiting for their meal, because they knew these were easy pickings if those folks got in the water, if their raft sank. So I knew I had to put the sharks in there, and I thought, well, that's going to be how somebody goes, and it was Yvonne. Why is it Yvonne? Because he's so close to Isabel. I wanted you again to feel that loss, and if it had been Yvonne's older brother or his older brother's girlfriend, like, it wouldn't have been as heart-wrenching. It would still been awful, but it wouldn't have been as heart-wrenching because they wouldn't have been like the best friend of Isabel. So I did it on purpose again, to make you feel bad. I'm sorry, not sorry. But I did it to support the math. The math said that more people died on that journey than lived. And again, I turned in the book and my editor was like, you can't kill Yvonne. No, don't kill Yvonne. And I was like, I know, but then who else do you want me to kill? And she's like, I don't want you to kill anybody. And I'm like, I know, but more people died on that journey than survived it. And am I telling the truth about how hard that was if everybody makes it or if everybody lives? And so she understood that argument too. And that's why I put that in there. And it's still very hard too. So, and we may have a similar question about Joseph. 6 million European Jews died in concentration camps during World War II. And something like 100,000 of those were children. And again, I thought, I don't know how I can tell this story and have them survive the Holocaust, because the Holocaust swept so many people up in it. So again, each story, somebody is lost along the way, and that was done on purpose.
Well, our next question is coming from Loudoun School for Advanced Studies. They basically sent in a lot of questions. Refugee was a huge hit at their school, and many of the students are now sharing other of your books with each other. And so their English teacher, Sarah Durr, said nothing makes her happier than the fact that they're sharing all these different books. But a few of their questions include, why do you choose to end every chapter on a cliffhanger? And was the ending supposed to be happy or sad? And you sort of answered that it was supposed to be sad on purpose, but why the cliffhanger at the end of every chapter?
First of all, I'll give the big thumbs up and say we're done with spoilers, at least for right now. So if anybody's out there and still has their headphones off or their fingers in their ears, I'm sorry, you're probably very waxy by now. But so this is a great question and not spoilery. So the end, I think, just to come back to that for a second, is sad. There are sad things that happen, but I do think it is a hopeful ending, and I think it is a positive ending. I hope so. I did not want to end the story on a sad note. There is sadness in that last chapter, certainly, as we find out the fates of some of the characters. But I feel like it is it's a story about, well, I often say that Germany is kind of a character in this book. Germany starts as a real villain in Joseph's story. The German government, the Nazis do. And then by the end of the book, Germany is a hero. Germany is accepting refugees into their country. They have been leading the European Union in this and been really a really strong leader in saying we should be accepting more people than we are even now. And not every German agrees with that. There's still dissension inside the country, but the government has held firm for decades now. And I think that's a very positive thing. And so I felt like I definitely wanted to end with that. Why do I end the chapters on cliffhangers? Well, okay, so a couple of reasons. Number one, I want you to keep reading, right? I don't want you to be able to put the book down. So I always try to end with something exciting or something unanswered so that you have to come back. But there's also another practical reason too. If I was writing a book about just one character, I would still want to do that to make you keep turning the pages. But when you're writing a book with 3 different characters in it, okay, I have to make sure that each of those characters is equally compelling. That you want to, when you read a chapter from Joseph, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to know what happens to Joseph. But so I don't want you to skip Isabel and Mahmoud to come back to Joseph. I want you to be like, but oh my gosh, that last Isabel chapter we read, we left off on a cliffhanger with her. So I got to read what happens to her next. And I don't want to skip Mahmoud because I want to know what happened from his previous chapter. So I had to work really hard to make sure not only that you just keep turning the pages, but that you didn't want to skip any of the kids, that you wanted to read each of their stories equally. And a big way I do that is to leave you on a cliffhanger in each of those chapters. Not every single one, but I think most of them. And say like, I gotta know, and make you just dying to keep reading and move ahead. So I know that frustrates a lot of readers. They're like, oh man, this is so brutal. But I hope that even if you were frustrated in the moment, that it made you keep reading the book, and that in the end, it helped you fly through it. The thing that's worse for me is when I'm reading a book or when I've written a book where the chapter just ends and you're like, oh, that was good, and you put it down, but there's nothing that's calling you back. You know, you're like, oh, I could go play Minecraft, and you go play Minecraft for like 30 days and you forget about the book and you don't pick it back up. So I'm hoping that you go play Minecraft for 30 minutes and then you come back to my book.
Well, we had a question from the chat, and there was a debate evidently in class about
Yes.
this young person that's on the cover. So they want to know who is this person?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen, where I still have the cover up there while I talk about it here real quick. And then I'll bring us back. Just so we have the big cover up there for everybody to see. So I get this question a lot too. Who's on the cover, right? So first of all, I don't make the covers. This is a big thing that a lot of especially young readers, but still some adults think that I draw my own covers or create my own covers. The publisher does that. So I write the book, and then once it's done with a couple of different revisions, my editor sends it off to the art department and at the publisher, and they read it, and she talks to them about what she thinks the cover should look like, and they talk about what they think the cover should look like, and they come up with an idea. And usually I'm not consulted in this at all. Instead, one day it just kind of shows up in my inbox, and they're like, here it is. They don't even say like, what do you think? Because they really don't care what I think. They're just like, here's your book cover. And I'm like, oh, very cool. Okay. If it's, not so great. Then if it is great, I'm like, oh my gosh. And this is one where I opened it and was like, oh my gosh, I love this cover. It is so dynamic. It is so emotional. It says so many things. But the big question everybody has is, who's that kid? Because it's a boy. And so like, is it Yvonne? Because it's like a raft, like the Cuban story in a way. Like it really wouldn't be like Joseph. He's never in a raft like that. And the one that Mahmoud's in later on is more like an inflatable raft. And so anyway, here's my answer to that question. I didn't create the cover, so I don't know what the creator was thinking. But my answer is kind of a cheater answer. I think it's all of the characters, and I think it's none of the characters. And what I mean is, I think it's supposed to represent the journey of, I think it's supposed to represent being a kid on a dangerous journey. That raft may not be any of the rafts that I wrote about. Even in Isabel's story, the raft isn't orange, right? Or red. So that is just supposed to be like a kid on a dangerous journey on choppy seas, trying to get somewhere safe. Like they're clearly not safe. There's rain coming down, there's choppy waves, but there is a light. There's light beyond them there that I hope says something like hope. that there is a place of refuge for them down the road. I think it represents all of them, and I think it's none of them in particular. So my answer has always been, I think that it's all of them and none of them. So I know, kind of a cheater answer. You can think that it's Yvonne if you want to. You can think that it's Joseph or something like that. It looks like a boy to me, so I don't know that it's Isabel. I think it's kind of just a representative cover meant to represent what that journey is like, how dangerous it feels, and how hopeful the characters must be.
Right. Well, we have some questions from the chat as well as submitted questions. So they want to know, will you direct a movie about Refugee? Will there be a movie about Refugee?
Right. So just like I don't make my covers, I also don't have any say whether it gets made into a movie. I wish if I got to say that, then all of my books would be movies all the time. So what has to happen is I have to wait for somebody in Hollywood to find the book and then to come to us and say, we want to make a movie. And then I will say, yes. This happened with Refugee. There's a company that did Love, Simon and The Fault in Our Stars and The Hate You Give. They've done a lot of great movies out of great books for young readers, right? Those are all YA, and this one's a little bit younger, but still great movies, great authors, great books. And they came to me and they said, we'd like to do a movie version of Refugee. And I said, yes. And so they went and they hired a screenplay writer. Now, I could have asked to write the screenplay, but I write books. I mean, I'd like to think that I could write a movie script, but I haven't done it before. And I'm not, if it took me 13 books to get to where I could write the book of Refugee, I'm not sure I want that to be my first movie that I try to write. So I said, go and find somebody who's great at writing movies. So they hired somebody who's great at writing movies, and he wrote a script, and I read it. It's great. And they said, awesome. We're excited about it. We're going to do one more bit of revision on it, and then we're going to start looking for somebody to direct it and maybe talk to actors. And then guess what happened? A pandemic hit.
Oh.
Yeah, the same thing that happened to everybody. Yeah. So right as all this was getting going, the pandemic hit and it shut everything down. Hollywood shut down. Everybody shut down. The writer was still able to go and do revisions on the script because he was sitting in his house just like I sit in my house and write books too. So that part's done. And now Hollywood is just getting back up and running. And now they're talking about taking it back out to directors and actors and movie studios. So fingers crossed that something will happen with it. It's totally not up to me. It would be amazing if it does happen. Look, we all know that oftentimes, most times, the book is better than the movie. Usually the movies are not nearly as good as a book because there's so much more material in a book and it's hard to translate that onto the screen. Sometimes though, movies made from books are really, really fantastic. No matter what, I would love to see it made into a film or a TV show or something like that. Why? Because so many more people watch movies and TV than read books. I wish it was the other way around, but more people watch movies and TV than read books. And I had a mission with this book. As I said to you at the outset, I hope that it opens hearts and minds to the plight of refugees, past and present, all over the world. And if making it into a TV show or a movie gets more people to see that and hear that message, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So I will not be directing a movie version of Refugee. I wish I could do it, but they cost millions of dollars. I don't have millions of dollars. They take teams of thousands of people. I do not have a team of thousands of people. So I have to wait for somebody in Hollywood to do that. Fingers crossed that it happens.
But it sounds like we could potentially see in the next, year or so that, on the big screen, we could see, Refugee.
Yeah, and you know what? I think there's one actor who'd be perfect for all three of the kid roles, and that's The Rock. Certainly people would go see it. I do not think that would be a good movie, though.
Well, good. Well, we're getting close on time.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions that we had, both, submitted as well as within the chat. But wanted to thank everyone who tuned in, as well as the patrons and teachers, school librarians, students who went and submitted their questions in advance, including those from North Star High School, the Loudoun School for Advanced Studies, the Project LIT students at John Camp High School, Mill Run Elementary, St. Teresa School in Ashburn, Eagle Ridge Middle, Smarts Mill Middle School, and many, many other schools and individuals as well. So those of you that submitted your questions ahead of time, there's going to be a few select winners. And so, be on the lookout. The library staff will be reaching out to those winners for that selection. And so this program will be repeated on the Loudoun County Public Library online YouTube channel. And we will also link it in the library calendar earlier next week. So on behalf of Loudoun County Public Library, we want to thank you so much, Alan, for taking the time to spend with us and to share your book, Refugee, with us. It was an amazing book. We do hope that we know we're not going to have a sequel to it. But
No sequel.
We hope it does come out in the theaters. And so if you have anything else you want to share with us, please feel free.
I want to express my appreciation to all the young people who read this book, to all the teachers and educators who put this book into their hands. I want to thank you guys at the library system and everybody in Loudoun County for coming together. Thank you so much for choosing Refugee as a one community, one read book read. It's an amazing thing for me to know that so many people were checking this book out and reading it and talking about it. I always hope that it's a book that's read together with families, like kids are reading it with their parents, kids are reading it with their teachers, and having great conversations about this. So I love that you guys invited me and that I got to be a part of that conversation tonight. So thank you for organizing this, Christina, and all the folks behind the scenes. Susan, I know, is watching behind the scenes, and thank you again to all the folks at the schools who are putting Refugee into the hands of young readers, and all you young people who are reading it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Alan, for coming and speaking with us. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope that you have a wonderful evening. And really, on behalf of Loudoun County Public Library and the Board of Trustees, we just thank you for your time and enjoy your evening. So have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Be safe
All right.
and keep reading.